Welcome. This is For Better and Worth.
The podcast where we don't believe you have to sacrifice your relationship while you grow and build your net worth.
We are your hosts.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Ericka Young. And we're so glad you're joining us today.
All right, y'all. Let's get into it. Hey, folks. Here we are back at it again. How you doing, babe?
I'm good. I'm smiling at my honey.
Look, I always like that. I can always appreciate that.
You look cute today.
Well, you look great. You look great as well.
Thank you.
But we're back out here, trying to put more content out for you guys that are tuning in, listening. And I think this will be an interesting topic that we get into today, because I think I'm a fairly positive person, I have a positive outlook on life, glass is always half full sort of mentality. And so it's going to be interesting. We're going to talk about financial optimism and pessimism today. And I don't know, I've never thought about it in those ways, but when you hear those terms, what comes to mind for you?
I feel like I'm an optimist as well, but I think when it comes to money, one might observe me being a pessimist. And the reason I say that is because I think we have to define being a realist. And I sit in the space of realism all the time. Like you can't be a budgeter, a spreadsheet person, or looking at all the numbers without it just being centered in reality. And so while that's good and it's helpful and it has its place, I think sometimes that can come across. I think you and I have butt heads a little bit because, I'm this realist person and you have a vision cast mentality where you see like the big picture and you're trying to look 5 steps ahead and all of that. And I think a lot of people can run into that challenge. Mm-hmm. And although a lot of the times in many circumstances, I'm looking at the sunny side, I feel like with money, I'm probably not. I think that's where we disagree. Like if you see a bright side or you are optimistic about it, I tend to take that, I want to say realistic point of view versus just a pessimistic point of view. And then we end up, kind of clashing sometimes. I think that can be very common for people.
Yeah, when I posed that question to you, that's the first thing I thought about when it came to you was not so much pessimism, but, you're just a realist, just looking at the situation and the reality of what it is.
Yeah.
And not really looking at a vision or things like that. You're like, well, hold on, this is where you are today. So I think, before we get too deep into this, we need to kind of talk about or just define so we can both agree what financial optimist and pessimist would look like.
Yeah.
And so I would say from optimist perspective, you can look at your situation and you aren't discouraged by it. You maintain a level of motivation. You're encouraged to see what it can look like on the other side. If you're in debt, or if I put a hard T on that debt, or if your income is lower, you have vision to see, okay, this is when I get out of debt, this is what life could look like. Or, when I increase my income or, create business or find other revenue streams for my life, this is what it can look like. And to me, that's someone who's optimistic. And that optimism and that positive outlook can really help fuel the drive and the journey. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't have that fuel on the journey, as you take that journey, you could just fizzle out.
Yeah.
So I think people really do need to have a level of optimism, because that can be that, that gas in the tank or that fire in the belly that helps to push you forward to accomplish the goals that are on the other side of your current situation, no matter what it looks like.
Yeah, that's good. I think that's a really good way to look at it. And I think a pessimist is when we're going to the extreme, right, of pessimism on the complete opposite of what you just said. If we have 2 words, can I call a pessimist a negative Nelly?
or Eeyore.
Yes, no. Eeyore.
Woe is me.
And looking at that same debt profile or budget or, FICO score, looking at like, oh my gosh, I'll never get out of this, right? Like there is no real end in sight for that person. They just see that what it is today is what it potentially will always be. And they're having a hard time finding the silver lining or that light at the end of the tunnel. And it requires a perspective shift or someone else to give them the hope injection that maybe a optimistic person might have. And I think we need to add that third perspective that I believe is probably in the middle, which I mentioned before is like that realist, the person who's all about the numbers, or it's like this is what it is today, or this is, what is coming. And sometimes that can be negative and sometimes it can be positive, but they're a person who I would say potentially sits right in the middle and maybe can see both sides. And so I can appreciate that third perspective there too, because if you can flex, then that can be really helpful.
I like that, you don't have to just land on one or the other. And I like that you can sit in that middle space and you can be encouraged and hopeful for the future when it comes to getting out of debt, increasing your savings, your retirement, and you can still be realistic like, hey, I can't do all of this and continue to do the things that I've been doing because it could seem like, discouraging. So I think that's a good middle ground. And no matter who's out there listening right now, if you're someone who is, solo, and you have to kind of fall in that middle ground because you got to, in a lot of ways, be your own motivation. And if you're someone who's listening and you're in a couple relationship, I think you really need someone who is on both sides to help bring you guys as a collective unit back to that middle ground, that realistic point. Because if it's only, rainbows and unicorns and sunshine on the one side, but neither of you are thinking about the other side of the coin, like we can't continue this behavior, or we're never going to get there, then you probably would never get there if you were both on the other side. So falling in that middle ground, in that realism ram, taking some hope and encouragement, and being aware that what got you here won't get you there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really a good space for people to fall in.
So have you ever had a moment where you were a pessimist? Do you feel like you can identify a moment in time where you weren't optimistic and you didn't see the full big picture where it concerns money in particular?
I think if I was ever pessimistic, I think I always knew that we could accomplish things, but in the moment, sometimes you think about like, you know, I'll use one particular example, like save an emergency fund. That is six months, or in my case, I always wanted to have like 12-month emergency fund. I was like, man, that's a lot of money to sit just somewhere. And I was like, man, can we do that? Or, why would we do that? That's just a lot to just sit there. But I understand, the need for it. 6 months, I was like, yeah, you need to have 6 months on tap. And I was like, man, but do we really need 12 months? Or why am I trying to get to that point? And I don't know if I was really pessimistic, but I was kind of like teetering between that and the reality of it. And I think when I reached the point where I was like, okay, let me just pause. Let me think about this. I know we can do it. It may not happen today. It may take, time to build that. And then it was like, okay, well, why do I want that? And then mentally, I just walked myself through, okay, it creates not only security in my mind, but it creates security in your mind, being my wife, being my spouse. So I was like, okay, so I'm not doing it just for me. I'm doing it for other reasons in addition to just myself, because that gives you a sense of security and, you don't have to worry. And so then I was like, okay, so then I started to walk myself back from that side of, dang, do we need to do it? Can we really get there? How long is it going to take? Because that could be discouraging as well if it's not something that you can accomplish in the short term, and it may take longer than you would like. And, fortunately, we were able to hit that and do that and maintain that. But I think if I was going back to any point, it probably would be that. And I'm sure somebody who's listening is probably in the same situation. Like, I'm just trying to get to 1 month, then another month, of security, emergency savings. And I would say to people that, hey, just get started, because 1 month can turn into 2 to 3 to 6 to 9 to 12, and you could be right where you want to be.
Hmm. I feel like when you get a little experience under your belt, whatever that thing is that you thought was insurmountable, and it becomes possible or within reach, or you've accomplished it, then you have that, as you would call it, bank of experience. And now you're like, okay, if I can do that, then maybe I can do these other things. And I think it's easy to be a pessimist when you're young and inexperienced. I just really do. I think it's easy to say, oh my gosh, the world is crazy, and I think to some degree our kids have had um some of those viewpoints where it's just like this economy or these jobs or whatever, and it's with lack of experience under your personal belt of what is possible for you. It's easy to stay in that place, and what I'm hearing from you is just that, you know one, start, and two, what at one point you thought was a challenge or something mentally, you're like, wait a minute, is that possible? And then you realize you can get within reach of it, and then you realize you can actually attain it. You're like, okay. And then you became the person who was like, we really need to save, because now that's not an obstacle for you at all. You know what I mean? I think in my case, what's funny is, because I do feel like I'm a realistic person, I find that I'm much more optimistic with clients or other people, and like the bigger picture in the work, I have to give them the hope that I see. And I find that a lot of my clients might be pessimistic or feeling challenged in some of the goals that they have set or things that they want to see accomplished in their finances, and I have to give them that. Um and that is, I feel, something that, because I have to flex that all the time, that is something that could be, you know, I don't know if it's necessarily a barrier, but I definitely give a lot of that optimism and hope and inspiration to other people. And then in our situation, I sit back a little bit, to be honest, because you're the one who does the big picture vision, goals, and we have our goals together, but I think the big picture is so much easier for you than it is for me. And but I'm able to give that to other people. Like, they can't see their own vision, and I have to give them a piece. And I like to say, it's really good to have somebody in your life that you can borrow their optimism. You can borrow their vision that they can see for you, and just say, you know what, that would be super helpful if I can learn to get to where they are in that place.
It seems like it would be easier for you because you do that with clients to help them cast that vision. And so as you were talking, I was like, man, it seems like that would be easier for you to do because you do it regularly with clients that you may talk to. But you said something else that I always go back to, and that is you talked about experience. And I'm big on experience, and I always go back to, a long time ago we had a pastor say, I heard him say that you can only live on the experience of one man until you have to get experience of your own. And I think about that because you can live off of somebody else's experience for a time
Yeah.
until you have to get your own and put it into play and put it into practice, because that requires you to step out. And so it always draws me back to, you know, um, David and Goliath,
Uh-oh.
the giant. But before he even got to the giant, it always takes me back to, he said he slayed the lion and the bear. And you've heard me talk about this. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you see a lion up close, you're like, well, hold on, man. This thing is like,
Huge.
it is, the head of a lion is like gigantic. And he slayed a lion? You like, wait a minute. And then you think about a bear, and it doesn't matter, a black bear, brown bear, whatever it is, it's a bear, And I remember that movie, The Revenant,
What is that?
It was a Leonardo DiCaprio.
Okay, what is the plot? I don't remember this movie.
Well, it's a old. He
Yeah.
got attacked by a bear and was like almost torn to pieces.
Oh my
Oh yeah,
gosh.
it was wild. And so when I think about slaying the bear, and I think about that movie in the context of how he got like ripped up,
Oh my
I was
gosh.
like, hold on, man, who out here slaying bears?
Literally.
But the whole point is that you see the extreme of a lion and a bear,
Mm-hmm.
and he said he slayed a lion and a bear. That was experience,
Yeah.
and he had to go back to these experiences that he being David. I'm not
Listen,
trying to preach here,
preacher young in the
but
house.
but it's the thing about him going back to those experiences. And anybody would be like, man, if you saw a lion, nobody's trying to run up on a lion and slay it. They're like, no, let me get to safety. If you see a bear, you like, no, let me go in the opposite direction. Or let me think about what they say do. You're supposed to stand still or make yourself big or have your bear spray. But it was those experiences that he was able to tap into that then when the giant came, he could stand strong in the face of the giant because he had these other experiences. And I think people can take that analogy and apply it to their lives in so many ways. What was it that was your lion
Mm.
that came along in your life that when you first looked at it, it seemed like big? You were like, man, the head of this thing is really big. How am I going to attack this? But then you overcame it.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the experience that you had that was another, your car broke down and you didn't have any money to fix it, but you were able to conquer that and go and get another car, a newer car, a better car. So whatever your lion or your bear was, if you go back and think about those experiences, and I have points in our lives that I can go back and think about, we overcame this,
Mm-hmm.
we overcame that. And for me, those are my lion and bear moments.
Yeah.
And so then when that giant emerges or something that is seemingly a giant, I'm like, well, hold on. Let me go back to this experience that was my lion or my bear experience. And it allows me to step in and not be discouraged by what may seem like a giant in front of me.
I think it's interesting because in the moment in our own situations, we can have amnesia. Literally. Okay?
That's a good point.
I mean, because we can in one moment we can conquer this thing and we get through it and then forget that thing happened when the next thing comes. Case in point, when we were, I want to say a year or two into our relationship, I had a family member who passed away, and we did not have any money to go see my family, be with them for the homegoing services. I mean, we didn't have a couple $100 to buy a last minute plane ticket. And God provided by having someone nearby us give us their buddy passes, and we were able to fly and be with our family. And then just a year later, something else happened in our finances, and we were like, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this? What is going to happen? How are we? And it's super easy to forget that God provided and we got through it as a team.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to go back and look at that. And I think a really good practice could be to write down all the wins and successes or all the times that, and we just getting a little scriptural today, but I just feel like when God has shown up or when you have conquered something or when you have overcome, it's good to list that stuff out. And that's probably a really good thing to do to remind yourself of how far you have come and how many times you thought it was insurmountable, but you in fact overcame. I think that would help any pessimist that is having a challenge or even a realist who stays in that realm too much to remember those things. And I think a lot of times with you and I, we tend to remember the big picture, like we got out of debt.
Right.
But it came at the cost of 5 years of being
There's a lot of
consistent.
sacrifice that
Yes.
went into that.
And it was a long time ago. So it can be super easy to be like, that happened back then. So, not that it's not relevant, because it is, but we have to remind ourselves to get back to that place where we're like, you know what? We did the work to see the results. and we did see the results. And even if it's fixing your credit score, or you stayed on budget, or you had a very meaningful conversation with your partner about money, those little wins or those moments of progression matter in a big way. And they, help fuel, like you said, put gas in the tank to make sure you can keep moving forward.
Yeah, and it's almost like as you were talking about people writing it down, I'll be honest, I'm not a big journaler, but it may be one of those cases where people could just write down their wins, their successes in a journal. And I remember I was talking to our oldest daughter who works in corporate America, and like most people, it's coming up on that year-end review time. And I told her, I said, look, it's January 2024. I said, you should just create a document and you keep it on your desktop and just, call it, Young Successes 2024. And I said, write every month down, January through December. And then when you do something in January that is review worthy, just put it in there. And do that every month, little things to big things, put it in there. Because everybody knows that when it's time to write your own review, it's like, oh man, well, what did I do in January? And it's like the following January, you like, man, what did I do in the summer? Like,
Right.
what did I do in June or July?
Amnesia.
Right. You get amnesia, but if you've written it down, then you can easily pop that document open and it actually, when you read it and you see what you did, I think it provides additional context for you because it reminds you of, okay, this is what I did. Wait a minute, but in order to do that, I had to go through this. I had to go and do that. And then it gives all the color commentary to it, and it refreshes and revives it.
Mm-hmm.
So just imagine if people were able to replay successes that they had.
Mm-hmm.
In moments where they were pessimistic, they could say, well, this is what I had to do. And it gives them that additional color commentary. And they could say, I started out as a pessimist, but this was a success, and this is what it took. So I think that's a great idea that you had there. But when we are talking about like habits or things that people can adopt, what are some things that you think people can make part of their daily routine to? I think we're landing on getting into that realism zone.
Yeah. I mean, I think that for an optimist, a good first of all, if there are two parties who are at odds, one is a pessimist and one is an optimist, I really feel like it's good to hear both. I really feel like a good habit is to ensure that you don't shoot down the ideas of either person. One of the things that I learned about you is that you cast vision, and sometimes you're saying the vision, the big picture vision. Like even today, you said, okay, so this is what's going to happen. This is what I think should be happening with this car situation. And we already decided that this year, a car is not being purchased. And in my mind, I had to consciously say, let's not shoot down his big picture vision that he just said, because me shooting it down is irrelevant. Like that doesn't matter. Like let him have the moment of here's what he sees, because even if it's a year or two down the line, like that's important to you. What you just said is important to you. Let me not, as the pessimist or realist, shoot down the idea because it isn't happening today. I think a lot of times a pessimist can be in today way too much.
Yeah, they're like, oh, we're not doing that today. That don't matter.
Right.
And then as soon as you say, oh, that don't matter, it's like, well, hold on.
Because they can't handle the vision in the way that the other person can. And you just have to learn to say, let them have that. Now, on the flip side, I think, a habit that, an optimist towards a pessimist might need to temper as well is, not letting them stay there. You know what I mean? Like find some notes of encouragement. You know what I mean? Because if we're always doom and gloom, right? The sky is falling, the economy sucks, what is the election going to do to our money? Like constantly being a worrywart, then how productive so I think the other thing that would be helpful on a regular basis for a pessimist is to figure out, well, what does this mean in our practical finances on a regular basis? What is this worry, concern, fear? What is that telling me? And is there something I need to do differently to manage or weather that? Because I really with everything in me believe that, and I don't necessarily believe we have to stick with labels, okay? But we are today talking about the pessimist and the optimist.
Well, we want to get people into the realism zone.
That's right. That's right.
Ultimately.
Yeah, and to balance it and flex it,
Right.
right? But I really think that what a pessimist can bring to the table is an honest viewpoint on things that are hard, right? That things that are of concern, things that you might need to watch out for, danger, for instance, right? And I think what the optimist is great for is casting vision, looking big picture and broader, and saying at some point that danger won't always be our issue, right? And so it can be a good balance. I honestly think there's nothing wrong with having both parties. I just think that we need to know when to use it and when to not. And so I just, the best habit I can say is listen to one another and make sure you don't shoot down the messenger, because that is important in one, the relationship, but also in making sure that you're hearing what they're bringing to the table, because it's probably relevant.
Yeah, I think you bring some good points to bear, because it's always good to have someone who is kind of like, as they say, playing devil's advocate.
Yeah.
Because
I feel like I tend to do that a lot.
Yeah, and I've been wanting to be like, shut your face up.
We back to shut your face, huh, honey? This is not the first time you have shared that online on the airwaves.
Well, that I was directing it at the devil. I wasn't.
It wasn't
directed at you.
Not this time. Not this time, babe. Thanks. Well, I'll take it.
Let me be me. Let me do what I'm gonna do. But I think it's important, because Eeyore over here, like, woe is me. And since we're talking about Eeyore, Pooh over here, like, where's the honey?
Yes. And then Tigger.
Right.
Hopping around happy go lucky. Let's go.
But I just
do
think
Tigger, baby. Do Tigger.
I'm good.
Come on. I want you to do Tigger.
I'm good. But I think it's good to have, those differing point of views and perspectives. And in relationships, sometimes they just aren't respected because it seems like more confrontational than beneficial.
Right.
But I think it's advantageous to people don't take the time to stop, pause, and really assess. We're so, let's get it done. So impromptu. We're in this microwave culture, and we were talking about this one day when, if we go to buy a car, one, we're going with cash. And so we're in a position of power. It's like, okay, we can buy a car today, but we can wait. We're not in a hurry, because I just want the best deal. And I think about when people go to buy cars, they say, okay, we're going to go look at cars today. But in their mind, they're coming home with a car tonight.
Yes.
And people end up making that decision like, oh, they see the car, they fall in love with it, they drive it, then the salesman is good at, helping push them along in the process. And then, boom, the decision is made. And so the point is that it's good to have somebody who can help you temper that so you don't make a decision in the moment that could be contrary longer term. So I think there's benefit to both sides.
And when you said that, it made me think about the fact that we are making a decision about the total cost of the car.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when people make those quick decisions,
it's about the payment.
It's about that monthly payment. It is not about the total cost of the car. It is about, can we afford this payment? How different is it from our current payment?
Right.
Or, you know what I mean? Like, literally, that is what they're thinking versus the whole thing. They're not thinking the whole thing.
And look, it doesn't matter where you are today. If you are at a point where, you're making a payment, I'm believing that whoever is listening today, they may be making payments, but tomorrow they're going to be paying cash for cars.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a progression,
mm-hmm.
And so I remember when we were there, and you had to think about that, like, well, on a monthly basis, what can we afford?
Right.
Even though behind that, we were thinking like, okay, we're going to put chunks on this car and cut the time down to getting to a point where we're going to walk in and just be able to pay cash for a car. And it's just like a baby. You got to walk. You got to crawl before you can walk. You got to walk before you can run. So
So let me ask you this. Do you think that there is ever a good time to be pessimistic?
I think everything has a place, and I think depending upon the circumstance or the situation, sometimes like I was just saying, uh, uh, I don't want to keep saying pessimist and optimist, but
That's where we are
I
today.
know, but to have that reserved, controlled kind of view that someone who may be pessimistic, I think that can come in handy because you've already said it. It's like it helps you stay away from danger, and it helps you see the totality of a situation. Because especially when you talk about investing, you could have someone who is trepidatious about being high risk and saying, well, I don't want to lose money, when the person who's optimistic is like, well, we can win and we can gain a lot of money. And then you have to think about, okay, the market and how the market works and how it typically returns. And that's when a pessimist can say, okay, we can be higher risk because if you have longer time and longer terms to invest. That's why a lot of investment vehicles aren't for the short term, therefore the long term, because you can bear losses over the long term, just like you can have gains that can propel you forward over the long term. So I think there can be cases where it is advantageous, because I just like to know like some of the warning signs. And if you're an optimist and all you see is like the upside and the positive side of it, you could miss
Yeah.
some of the downsides or some of the things you really need to be cautious or just exhibit a little more care in.
Yeah, I think investing is the one place where many, if you talk to a financial planner, they're going to err on the side of pessimism or realism when they give you potential returns to be expected. And they're not going to be super duper optimistic, even if performance shows that, you can get a little bit more than what they're saying. They're covering their booties. Okay.
Right, they're hedging their bets because they're like,
Yeah.
look, as they say, under promise and over deliver.
That's right. That's right. And then in budgeting or in the short term, and I'm going to define short term as, less than 2 years, let's say less than 1 year, where you're doing the day-to-day expenses and all that kind of stuff. I think that's where being a pessimist or a realist is actually important and valuable to have, because you don't want to be expectant of a cash windfall, for instance, in this optimism, right? Like, we can just, do all these things because at some point, some random money is going to come, and
Right.
that's not realistic, right? But when it comes, great. Now we can do some of the stuff that we talked about. But I think in the short term is where, um, it could be good to have that balanced perspective. And I think the biggest thing is just making sure that that you are a team player when it comes to your partner, especially if you see things differently, and then that you leave space, for everybody to at least be themselves and share what's on their mind.
I love it. I love it. So let's talk about making it worth it. So we've discussed, the optimism and the pessimism side of it, and we've really wanted to help land people in that realistic zone of, what you really should be focused on. So what would you say people need to do to make it worth it, financially, if you're on either side of that?
I think the biggest thing is hear people out, hear your partner out. And it's okay. I mean, you can have a conversation about who's the pessimist and who's the optimist, but have respect for the differing of opinions, because I think that there's value to be added on all sides, and flexing that, and maybe coming a little bit more to the center of that is going to be helpful. It's a skill that I think is going to be useful for a long time. So just hear people out and make sure that you respect the fact that they could have a differing view, even if it's on the opposite spectrum of, optimism or pessimism.
Well, I would say to make it worth it, like chronicle those experiences that were teachers that helped you move forward no matter where you were on this continuum, because experience is the best teacher of all. And I really think that when you chronicle those and you go back and you gain a holistic perspective of, man, I was really discouraged, or I was really pessimistic about this, but I took these steps and they got me to a point where I was more, hopeful and more encouraged, and I was able to accomplish X, like specify what that was. I think that's helpful. And I think that is just a great thing to help move you forward, no matter where you're at. Because if you're just optimistic, you really have to go back and look at a situation and say, well, I was very optimistic about it, but I didn't think about some of the challenges that came along, and you can apply that and say, okay, now it helps in your decision making process as you move forward.
Yeah.
And that's what I say. If people really count that experience and chronicle that, it will help make it worth it for sure.
I love it. I love it. I think we have to build on our wins so that we can see what's coming next in a more, open light, if you will.
Right,
So this has been great, honey.
Yeah, it's been a good conversation, and
Yes.
I hope the people that are listening out there, identify where you are.
Yeah.
And don't stigmatize, your partner if they're different than you, but really embrace and appreciate those points of view. So.
Yeah. Awesome. So until next time,
we're out. Thank you for spending some of your time with us today.
We appreciate all of your support. So be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us wherever you listen to this podcast.
You can find us on Instagram at For Better and Worth.
And sign up to receive our free guide, The 7 Reasons Your Money Relationship Isn't Working with Your Partner, on ForBetterAndWorth.com.
Until next time, we're out of here.